Midway is a new film from director Roland Emmerich. It is the retelling of the Pearl Harbor events, the events that took place after that, leading into the Battle of Midway, which was of course seen as the turning point of the war for us. You might be wondering, Jackson, how do you have a review for Midway out already? Well, it's actually because I very rarely get screening opportunities. The last screening I actually went to was the Meg. I've gotten a few other opportunities since then, but either because of timing or schedule stuff, I wasn't able to go. So yesterday morning when I got the email saying, hey, we have seats open, would you like to see Midway? I was like, well, sure, there's a lot of movies coming out this weekend. I already know I'm going to see Dr. Sleeps, but I might as well just see Midway right now and get out of the way, clear up my weekend a bit. Maybe I can see Playing with Fire now. So that morning I got my passes, and later that night I went to the theater to go see it. There was a whole row reserved for like military students. This was like a whole thing, and not a security guard or a rep, but like a random audience member, maybe a critic, I'm not sure. He stood up and was like, I know there's probably a lot of people here that are military related or in the military. I just want to say thank you for your service. And, you know, everyone gave him a huge round of applause. Everyone applauded themselves. And then the movie started to play. And while the movie was going on, I couldn't help but think back to that moment where that guy stood up and said, thank you for your service, guys. I couldn't help but think back to that and think, man, these guys are all here to see a movie that is supposed to honor these brave men during these horrible, scary events. And unfortunately, they're seeing one of the worst put together movies I've seen all year. I am not exaggerating when I say this. This is maybe the worst war movie I've ever seen. I haven't seen a lot. I haven't seen every war film, but out of the ones I've seen, this might be the worst one. This movie has everything wrong with war movies today. And like to the umpth degree. There's literally a line of dialogue in this movie where someone mentions, this is my last day on sea duty and then I get to retire. Someone actually says that. And they have a conversation like, it's only smooth sailing from here once you're retired and stuff like that. It's like, bro, I can't believe we're at this level of writing and it only continues throughout. I remember the movie opened up, the first line of dialogue, and the way the actor said it, I was like, oh no, I'm really in for something terrible here. Because it was just that badly written, that badly acted, I couldn't believe it. And it was only one line of dialogue. And that poor dialogue continues throughout. There's so many cliched lines that people say, so many attempts at humor, the Roland Emmerich type of humor that we've gotten in some of his other movies that really falls flat. Another thing that really falls flat are these characters. I literally walked out of the theater, and there is a moment where they of course do like the freeze frame and then the name of the character and some info about this person is now doing this, or they went on to do this, and here are some of their other accomplishments outside of this film, and I still don't remember their names. I still don't remember anybody's name in this film, other than, well, that's Woody Harrelson, that's Patrick Wilson, that's Ed Skrein, that's Dennis Quaid. This movie isn't about fictional characters. It's made up of real-life people that actually existed. And unfortunately, they're treated as just like Wikipedia synopsis versions of who they really are. And that's actually a good parallel I can make about this whole movie. It is just what feels like a Wikipedia synopsis, but just made into a movie, elongated in certain areas and filled up with war movie cliches. You can really tell that nothing in this movie is what normal people say. There's no suspension of disbelief like, oh, well, this character is this way, so they say stuff like this, or anything like that. It's just, everything is off. No character feels real, no character feels natural, everything feels forced and contrived. And I was just sitting there in this weird mental state of, I don't know how this movie turned out as bad as it did. Because Roland Emmerich, despite him as a filmmaker, he very, very rarely has a film that's like universally praised. There's at least moments in his movies where people could be like, that was entertaining, or it was at least kind of fun. This movie, for me, just didn't have any of that kind of fun that I could find in, like, Independence Day or even Resurgence. Granted, I haven't seen that in a couple years, but I remember having fun with it. The Day After Tomorrow is, like, a mediocre movie to me, but even that has a couple moments that are kind of cool to see. This movie has nothing like that. The action sequences all suck. Not just because the CGI is really piss poor. Like, it looks like straight to streaming or straight to DVD kind of quality CGI, but somehow it got into a theater. There's moments where there's certain shots where you can see the real life people, but then you start to notice the digital stuff surrounding them, so it looks really weird and awkward. It's not even all that, but it's also because we don't get a chance to live in these action sequences either. The Pearl Harbor events happen in like the first 15 minutes of the movie, and then it just kind of went by really quickly. And I was like, I remember like the Michael Bay Pearl Harbor sequence at least getting you invested into that situation and really drawing it out. This movie was just like, all right, Pearl Harbor's happening, we're done. time to move on. It was like, really? That's how you're Roland Emmerich, and you have the opportunity to redo the Pearl Harbor incident, and you want to just do it as quickly and lazy and poorly made as this? Okay. Maybe I was just put off before that action scene started because there was this conversation that took place immediately right before where, like, this officer and this, like, young cadet get into, like, a little bit of an argument because the cadet doesn't feel like setting up chairs for the church service because he's an atheist, not Catholic. And it's like their attempt at, like, mini humor before this devastating attack starts. Which, by the way, there's many scenes in this movie where people act like they can't see any planes until, like, it's the last second. Like, honestly, I was astounded how literally some characters would look back and there's, like, planes, like, really close to them, but you would have heard them and seen them coming, like, from miles away. You know, so the last minute kind of shock, like, oh no, there's a plane right here now. It's, oh... So the action sequences were all terribly handled in this film. Moments of levity were not fun in the slightest. The characters are all piss poor, as I mentioned. This movie has some of the laziest writing of the year. Like Ed Skrine's introduction into this movie, he's doing, like, as they describe it, some cowboy stuff, and Luke Evans is basically the guy above him that's like, oh, we can't have that, and you're too much of a wild card, and stuff like that. It's like, we're really doing this right now? Jesus. Mandy Moore is, of course, just there to be a wife to Ed Skrein, and there's a moment where she has a conversation with Luke Evans, and of course she's headstrong about how my husband deserves a commanding position or whatever, and there's another character listening and going, I told you she's a firecracker, and it's like, oh my god, can you not do anything good? Nick Jonas, I don't know why he's in this movie, aside from the fact that he's a Jonas brother, and maybe he can bring in more people in the seats that aren't interested in seeing this movie, like, oh look, Nick Jonas is in it and I like him, I'll go see Midway. He's not even really in it all that much, and what they do with his character is just kind of, it's really, I don't even understand why they focused on it so much. I mean, I actually do get why they focused on it a little bit, because seeing where that character ends up, but beforehand, it's not like he's making that much of an impression. He's doing random things. Like, he does a random act of heroism that is, like, made out to be a big deal. That was one of the bravest things I've ever seen. But then they move on and they forget he's in the movie. And then there's a moment where, how do you manage to stay so calm, Nick Jonas? And he explains it, and then he's gone for a bit, and then end of his character arc. So, I don't know why he was in the movie. Until you see the end of his character, then you realize maybe he should have been in the movie more. Maybe this should have had a better team behind it. Maybe getting the guy who's been notorious for making big schlock shouldn't make this movie about a real-life event. You know? That's just me, though. Aaron Eckhart is almost the same way. You understand what the real-life person did, but then you see how it's portrayed in this movie. He just randomly shows up, and they get through his mini subplot, and then they end it, and it's like, alright, he doesn't need to be in the movie anymore. Like, he shows up randomly, and then disappears about 10 minutes later. So it's like, what was even the point? Well, what's even the point of making this whole movie if you're not going to focus on these people? Because that's what I really like about based on true story movies, is when you can actually get invested with these real life people and you can relate to them, you can understand their struggles and still connect with them. Like First Man. First Man isn't a movie that's really hokey and just so, like, we're proud to be an American because we landed on the moon fair. It was like an in-depth analysis of Neil Armstrong as a person at that time. Dunkirk is not a movie where people were like, yeah, we're gonna keep fighting on. It was depressing, it was horrifying, and it puts you in that position with these people, and you're able to understand what they went through and even relate to some people in certain places and analyze these people. This movie has none of that. It's all hokey and phony. Woody Harrelson is in this movie, and once again, of course, as I mentioned throughout, he's not bad, he's just not doing anything. And the material doesn't give him any opportunity to do anything either, so it doesn't matter. But his appearance in this movie, it just reminded me of another movie that came out last year called Shock and Awe. And that was a movie that took place after 9/11. It was about these reporters that were doing something. I forgot. But the way that movie was handled, where all the characters didn't feel like characters, they were pretty much weightless, and all the drama just felt non-existent. There was no tension or stakes or anything. It just felt really boring. The movie just kind of progressed without you really feeling anything. That's this movie. That's Midway. And Woody Harrelson is in both of these movies where they're based on true events, but they're handled so poorly that you get no characters that you connect to, no moments where you're actually intrigued with what's going on. You get nothing. It's essentially like you're going through air. You acknowledge it's there, but you don't feel anything. That's this movie. That's Midway. I've got to give Midway an F. I really despise this movie. There are people that stood up a bit and clapped in the theater. Not everyone, but a couple people did that, of course, so this will, of course, please some people. I've already seen some reactions on Twitter. Obviously, not everyone, but some reactions going like, it was actually okay. It was pretty solid. I'm like, what movie did you see? I was walking out of the theater, and the rep, he stopped some people walking out. I didn't get stopped, I just kept walking. But I heard a little bit going like, were there any action sequences or characters that stood out to you? And I heard the longest, from the people he stopped. Like, of course they don't know. No, because nothing stood out. There's no action that stood out. There's no characters that stand out because there's no characters in this movie. Another thing I wanted to mention. The Japanese in this movie are portrayed as just the stereotypical evil brooding bad guys. Like, of course, as per usual. I know the Japanese are supposed to be the bad guys in this movie, but I think portraying them as just kind of one-note evil, like, that's a little lame. There's a moment in the end where I thought this could have been really good if you actually maybe explored their perspective as well. Not like, I understand the Japanese for what they did. Obviously not. I'm just saying, like, maybe if we got to know them as people and actually relate to them, maybe we could have, like, a conflicting feeling of, oh, they did some really bad things and they're on the wrong side, but I understand them as people. I understand their lives. Like, it seemed like that's what they were trying to do with a certain ending that they did for the three of them. But that's not what they did. They just acted like we're like the Empire, pretty much, of, like, Star Wars, so yay. Midway. Go see it if you like really terrible movies, I guess. Or if you're just blind to any criticism if it comes to war movies. If you just like seeing war movies and don't care if it's actually good or not, then I guess you can go see Midway. But as far as this movie trying to honor the men in this situation, the real life people that they were portraying, I thought they did a really piss poor job. And I feel like just because they attempted to make a movie about it doesn't mean they get a pass like, oh, well, it's okay. They filmed the movie. It's like, no, you made a piss poor product, guy. But if you've seen Midway, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.